This morning I'm talking about the subject of Christ is with us. And this is taken from the series of books by Torquem Sardarian, The Teachings of Christ. When we think about Christ, I think most people default into thinking about the past, that the Christ was here. And then they think that the Christ has faded away. But that is old age teaching. As I was driving over here this morning, I happened to be listening to the Oprah Winfrey radio show. And she was interviewing a young man. And unfortunately, the reception was coming in and out. It was not real clear. They were having problems with their production. But I heard enough to remind me that so many people are waking up to the other worlds. This particular man was a physician, a neurologist, and he was recovering from a very serious disease. And that part of the process had found him for a period of time with a clinical death. And his experience as he recovered and lived to tell about it, he wrote a book. And in writing the book, he shared the story about how it emphasized that experience helped him to really, really believe in God as a true and factual, energy. It helped him to believe Christ. It helped him to believe in angels. And it helped him to understand life beyond the dense form, to understand life beyond space and time. And he says it's so real, it's just so real. And coming back, into space and time, coming back into the dense physical body, he said was so very difficult. And yet, the soul yearns to come back into dense matter and space. And of course, we know the reason for that, and that is to help the unfolding human soul evolve. So along his line of thinking, it just seemed so appropriate to be driving over here this morning, listening to his beautiful story, and realizing that this magnificent information given to us by Torquem and the Ageless Wisdom, that Christ is with us, just helped to make it, become more real, more real. To realize that Christ is active, that Christ is here with us. He said, I have never left you, and I will never leave you. So if that's the case, why can we not sense the Christ being with us? Well, the answer is very simple. It has to do with refinement, that we must refine ourselves in order to come in contact with Him. We are told that Christ is working through the 7 fields of human endeavor. And we are told that if just 2 others are gathered together in His name, that He is there with us. This is not new information to us. It's a reminder, and perhaps after today's talk, it will serve to strengthen our belief and strengthen our understanding, and to help transform our way of living and our lifestyle just a little bit. And in that little bit, I'm hoping we can find more joy and more beauty and more freedom. When Jesus was here as a 6th ray master, Christ, the head of hierarchy, expressed Himself through Jesus. Now humanity is waiting for the reappearance of the Christ. But what does this mean to us if He never left then how can he reappear? So this is my present understanding. As life advances, so Christ advances. And how is this going to occur, and how will we know it? Well, let me share a little bit of information with you, which is going a little outside of the topic this morning, but I think it ties it all together ultimately. But it's a good thing to know, and it's a good thing to think about, and it's a good thing to remember, and that is to consider the avatar of synthesis. Because we are moving into that time now that the avatar of synthesis is coming into the consciousness of disciples and of initiates. This avatar of synthesis is coming to us from outside of the solar system. This avatar of synthesis is going to express himself through Christ. Head of hierarchy, just like Christ expressed himself through Jesus. So avatars are divine. They come to us from outside the solar system. For example, Sanat-Kumara, the Ancient of Days, also called the Lord of the World, came to us from the Venus scheme. Sanat-Kumara is the physical incarnation of the planetary logos. He is the lower self, which is kind of hard to, use that word lower, right? He is the lower self of the planetary logos. The planetary logos being the higher self. Okay? In other words, Sanat-Kumara is the representative of the planetary logos. So that we can fully embrace and grasp. Sanat-Kumara is the extension of the will of the planetary logos within humanity, the personification of his will and the plan. Now, these avatars are sent by the headquarters of avatars that decides what to do in any given situation. They decide what to do and whom to send where. The headquarters of avatars decided to send the avatar of synthesis. So this took place a long time ago, but now the time for the manifestation is in process. It is occurring right now. This is why some people believe that the ashram of the avatar of synthesis is already functioning. I won't go into all the details of it, but I do suggest that you study in the teachings more about this. Let me share this much about the ashram of synthesis and the avatar of synthesis. This particular ashram is not limited to one specific ray or one specific master. Did you know that? It includes the Ray 1, the Ray 2, and the Ray 7 masters, which means that it's bringing, in my opinion, it means that it's bringing more and more and more of us together. Those of us on the path, those of us that are functioning in the ashram, it's bringing more of us together in consciousness, which certainly helps to strengthen our hands and our feet. Okay, so if the avatar synthesis is going to be expressing himself through the Christ, the head of hierarchy, then it is going to be up to the hierarchy to recognize the avatar synthesis and up to humanity to recognize the reappearance. It is not Jesus, but the Christ who is coming. And the avatar synthesis is going to express himself through Christ. Now, this is a little factoid. We are also told that cosmic avatars cannot descend below the cosmic mental plane. But they can project an image of themselves onto the mental plane, and this is where we will make contact. Thus, and this is my whole point, it is very important that we are able to refine our consciousness to such a degree that we can contact this plane of activity, the higher mental plane. We must progress within the ashram of the Christ in order to be in contact, in order to contact Him. The ashram of the Christ is hierarchy. Remember that. Some of us tend to think it's Ray too, but it is the ashram of the hierarchy. So maybe one day we are going to be in contact with Him, or maybe one day we were in contact. Why not? Back then, however, He was going at 5 miles per hour, and we were going at 5 miles per hour. But now the Christ is going at 1,000 miles per hour, and we're still at 5 miles per hour. We cannot contact Him now, and this is why. Not until we refine our consciousness. As we refine our consciousness, then our speed increases, right? So there's our future, there's our hope, and there's our reality. We are going to refine our body, we're going to refine our emotions, and we're going to refine our mind. After He resurrected, He came many times. We are told that for 11 years, until the disciples all passed away, He was with them every day. After that, He came and He had interviews with many saints. Isn't that beautiful to know these things? For example, St. Francis of Assisi. Now we know these stories, but did we connect the dots in this way? When I was in Italy a couple of years ago and went to that whole beautiful area where His church was and all these really difficult paths to walk up, mountains, rocks. I was so excited to think this was the abode of St. Francis of Assisi. But even then, I didn't connect the fact that the Christ actually, it was really the Christ that spoke to him. Until reading this. The Christ said to St. Francis, "My dear, you are going to build my church." How simple. So, St. Francis started to do it. However, St. Francis was a very thin man, and he died young because he did his job and then passed away. But after hundreds of years, we are still remembering St. Francis. Just one contact is enough. This is why we say that our intelligence, our power, our position, our education does not make any difference. I mentioned this in class Wednesday night when we were talking about the masters, and I said I was so shocked to learn one day that at some point the masters were illiterate. Isn't that shocking? Because we place such a high value on our intelligence and reading and writing and arithmetic. And to imagine that the masters at one point were not, they were illiterate. But we can be destroyed by our own intellect, and we have seen this happen over history. We can be destroyed by our own knowledge, by our own position, and dump ourselves into the deep hole, unless or except we come in contact with him. Now here's some stories. There was an Armenian saint in the 10th or 11th century who used to talk with Christ. He was called Gregory of Narek, more commonly known as Narragansett. He lived from 951 to 1003 and is a canonized saint. As Nagatsi's people, for his people, he believed that the absolute goal in life should be to reach God. Look how evolution has changed this idea. He told his people that the most important goal in life is to reach God and to reach wherever human nature would unite with their godly nature, thus erasing the differences between God and man. Imagine the New York Times writing an article like that. This is your ultimate goal. As a result, the difficulties of the earthly life would disappear. This is what this saint believed. According to Narragansett, mankind's assimilation of God is possible not by logic, but by feelings. Numerous miracles and traditions have been attributed to this saint, and perhaps that is why he is referred to as the watchful angel in human form. Now you can read more about this saint in Wikipedia. So he was walking in the street one day, and he saw a wounded man lying in the street. His disciples said, "He is already dying." The saint said, "No, I cannot leave this man here." So like Mother Teresa, he said, "I can't leave that man here, let me take him." So they put him on the saint's back. And suddenly, when they were walking, they realized that the wounded man was no longer on the saint's back. He was walking beside the saint. The saint looked at him and said, "Oh, it is my Lord. Yes." He was a leader of the well-developed school of Armenian mysticism at Narek Monastery. At the request of his brethren, he set out to find an answer to an imponderable question. What can one offer to God, our Creator, who already has everything and knows everything better than we could ever express it? To this question, posed by the prophets, the psalmists, the apostles, and saints, he gives a humble answer. The songs of the heart, which was expressed in his book of prayer, also called the Book of Lamentations. And here's another story. You can find all these stories in Wikipedia. I've just shortened them. They're very inspiring. Here's another story. There is a Hindu Pakistani, Sadhu Sundar Singh. One night, Sadhu said, "I really want to know the truth, whether Christ exists or not. If he exists, everything will change in my life. If he doesn't exist, then why all these churches and things?" So he said, "Christ, I am talking to you. I know what you are. I know you are present. But if by dawn you do not appear to me, I am going to throw myself under the locomotive engine." So he is waiting. And just before dawn, suddenly a great light came into his room. And he said, "Do you believe me now?" So this Pakistani who became Christian said, "Because I was a Sikh who became Christian, they put me into the skin of a big animal. They had tied him in the skin and left him in the sun. Well, what happens when you're tied up like that? The skin starts to dry and slowly cuts your bones and everything. So he said, I was waiting. Slowly, slowly, the skin became so tight. I didn't know what to do. I said, my Lord, where are you? And then his voice came. He said, just jump out. I said, well, how can I jump out? I am tied. He said again, just jump out. So I immediately obeyed, and the skin opened, and I went out. We know that a great sage saw him. The Tibetan master, we are told, saw him and conversed with him. There are many other examples like this, and you can find them in your research. So it is not by logic. It is not by reasoning. It is by faith that we are able to contact Christ, and the ability to live by the rules of Christ. It takes faith. The Tibetan master says about Christ that at every sunset, he stands under a big pine tree and blesses the world, and that this is why every sunset is different. Christ is with everybody and every group and church that follows the 5 principles of beauty, goodness, righteousness, joy, and freedom. So there are those 5 principles again. And let me repeat this again, that Christ is with everybody and every group and every church that follows these 5 principles. Beauty, goodness, righteousness, joy, and freedom. So let's talk a bit about each of these 5 principles. The first, to think that wherever there is beauty, he is there. Beauty of the body, beauty of the heart, beauty of mind, beauty of spirit, and beauty of relationship. Wherever there is ugliness, we cannot find him. And why is this? It's because light never lives with darkness. Light never lives with darkness. This is such a profound statement. You know, you can use it as a seed thought. Light never lives with darkness. And ask yourself, what does this mean physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually? For myself, this phrase is like a beacon of light on the path to help make our decisions. Is this light or is this darkness? He says, test this. Think about something ugly and you will see how you are poisoning your system. Think about something beautiful and you will see that you are brighter, beautiful, loving, and people will love you. You will become magnetic. Do you believe this? With your whole heart, do you believe this? Goodness. We must become the embodiment of goodness. I'm so visualizing the New York Times, this whole article. I bet you it would be a bestseller. So don't say things that are charged with hatred, with separatism, with treason, with malice and slander. For some reason, this is not so easy to do as it seems. So we must check ourselves 24 hours every day. For example, can we go for 24 hours without lying? We lie to our spouse, we lie to our children. Pitiful, isn't it? We're so dense. We live in such a dense world. But, and this is what this young man said in the interview with Oprah this morning, meditation is so important. Meditation puts us back in the light of these 5 principles of beauty, goodness, righteousness, joy, and freedom. It helps us to surpass the materialism and the dense energy of the planet and takes us into the other worlds, to the astral, the higher mental, and at times into the spiritual triad. Meditation. We can have $1 million. We know couple of people who won the lottery have quite a few millions of dollars. But nonetheless, our worth is a penny if we do not live by these principles. See, now we're talking about the spiritual worth. Because surefire guaranteed, all those millions of dollars, if we die tomorrow, evaporates and goes back to the state or the estate. It didn't change us unless we live by these principles. So from a spiritual point of view, we are not worth even a penny because we still have jealousy, we still have envy, and we're creating many messes in people, we hurt people, we harm people, yet we call ourselves a respectable human being. You know, it was so amazing to me to see the reaction of so many people in this country, in the US, reacting to the negative platform of the elections. It's like, stop it already. Even some of our journalists on CNN and MSNBC, those are the 2 channels I usually watch, saying, we're tired of this. You know, let's just get the election over with and let's move ahead. Finally, it's like we're so saturated with negativity and lies and going backwards that maybe the good point that came out of all of this is we can really see the absence of light in such darkness. Right? Goodness, goodness is so important. Righteousness is a third. Righteousness can be understood from different views. It means to live in the frequency of our inner divinity. I really like this because, why? Because righteousness is such a religious term. And it really turned me off the first time I heard that righteousness. But this definition changed mine, and now I get it. I get it. It means to live in the frequency of your inner divinity. It is a substance by which a servant of the hierarchy is built. And it means that we do not deceive others. That's righteousness, and that's beautiful. Joy. Agni Yoga says that joy is a special wisdom, right? Joy is the passageway of the spiritual warrior. The Master in Supramundane 1, verse 14 says, there are many waiting. Let them learn first about the difficulties of the journey and clearly understand the fight with darkness. Let them not hope to avoid it. Let them not hope to avoid the fight with darkness. the path to joy cannot be easy. There will be joy. He says, we shall speak more about joy, but first let us forge the armor of the Spirit. For only in the acceptance of suffering can the embryo of the joy of wisdom be born. It cannot be achieved without suffering. Only with us is the joy born. Again, that was Supramundane, Volume 1, paragraph 14. And finally, freedom. Helena Rourke wrote, everybody is preaching various freedoms. But the most opposite schools of thought agree in one thing. They all are afraid of freedom of thought. Most people speak about freedom of speech, but how many consider freedom of thought? Did your parents or your teachers give you this gift, freedom of thought? But this is one of the principles of Christ. It is important that as a person we allow others the freedom of thought. Again, from Letters of Helena Rourke, Volume 1, she says, one must firmly understand that all the given orders can never enslave the spirit of a disciple, because there is always left the freedom of individual expression, and we know how endlessly we may refine the quality of the fulfillment of every task. Only a petty consciousness is afraid to lose his individuality by fulfilling the plans of his guru. To rely only upon our own accumulations, rejecting all that which we can assimilate from the high consciousness of the teacher with the capital T, means to reject any new accumulations. Individuality is formed from these new assimilations combined with previous accumulation. She wrote, Buddha brought freedom to India by his rejection of the caste system, but by refusing Buddhism, India entered into slavery. The theoretical acceptance of the teachings of Buddha and Christ are one thing. The theoretical acceptance is one thing, but it is an entirely different manner to practice them and to realize them through the heart. The true follower of Christ and Buddha is the one who realizes the single, fundamental, and universal doctrine which is behind them and which is nourished by them. Only such a follower enters the path of evolution. All right, I'm wrapping this up now. Pay attention. Okay. If you need help, ask him. It can happen in an instant. Ask him and you will see where he is. And don't doubt it. Once you doubt, you have short-circuited yourself. Don't doubt. If you doubt, then it is gone. If you don't doubt, then you have it. There's a well-known story about Peter and Christ. One day, he was walking in the boat, fishing with some of his disciples, and St. Peter saw him. Lord, he said, is it you? Yes. Christ said, well, if it is really you, let me come and see you. Christ started to walk on the waves. When he started to walk, St. Peter said, well, if it is really you, give me orders so that I walk on the waves also. He walked a little, maybe a quarter of a mile, but suddenly he started to sink. Christ grabbed him and pulled him up and said, You of little faith. Why did you doubt? So keep this story in your minds. And anytime you doubt, you're going to go to the bottom, because doubt short circuits your whole spiritual computer. It is gone. Okay, that's it. Are there any questions? I'm looking at the iPad here to see if there are any questions from our web viewers. It's kind of hard to ask a question with this kind of, this kind of a lecture. It's like, it is or it isn't. But it's inspiring, and it was just truly a joy to put it together and to share this morning.